Hello, everyone. My name is Sonia, and thanks for coming to my presentation. I hope you're enjoying the Polyglot gathering so far. The talk I'm going to present is about the diminutivos in Spanish, los diminutivos en la lengua española. This topic is quite close to my heart because most of my academic career I've devoted to the research of the diminutivos in the Spanish language. And first, well, it started during my undergrad. My thesis that I wrote at the end of my bachelor's degree was the diminutivos in Spanish and in Portuguese, how to form them and how to use them. And then I thought I'm going to analyze this topic even more deeply, and I wrote my master's thesis about the diminutivos in Spanish as well. And right now I'm writing a PhD in the same topic, but I treat the diminutivos topic from the point of view of more geolinguistics. First, I'd like to mention other languages. I know that diminutivos also exist, for example, in some of the Slavic languages. My native tongue is Polish. We also have zdrobnienia, which would be the diminutives in Polish. But I think that still in Spanish, the diminutivos are used more, and there's more suffixes, and they are used in different situations when I wouldn't use a diminutivo in Polish, for example. Other Romance languages like Portuguese has inu, Italian has ino. I know that German has shen. So diminutivos are not only in Spanish, but this is what my presentation is about. So let's begin. And by the end of this presentation, you will have heard the answers to the following questions. What is a diminutivo? How do you form it? What are the possible diminutive suffixes? Which parts of speech do you use them? And what is their function? But in order to do that, let's analyze a bit of the songs. Here we have three fragments of three songs where you have a lot of diminutivos. The first one is the famous song Despacito by a Puerto Rican musician, Luis Fonsi. You might have heard this song already. It's from 2017, I think. And even in the title, we already have the diminutivo Despacito, which is the diminutive of the word slowly, despacio. But it's not the only diminutivo in the song. We can have a look at pasito a pasito, suave suavecito, nos vamos pegando poquito a poquito. So you also have pasito, which is diminutive of paso, a step, and suavecito, diminutive of suave, which can mean, for example, soft or softly. Poquito a poquito are diminutives of poco, which can mean little. Let's have a look at the lyrics of another song. This time is this song from 2015, Rico Martin's hit. Rico Martin is also from Puerto Rico. And you can already see in the title, La Mordidita, the diminutive of la mordida, which is a bite. Another example is poquita, diminutive of boca, mouth. Todito, a diminutive of todo, el día, in this case, whole day, all day. Orillita, a diminutive of orilla, seashore, and many more. For example, picadita, despacito, again, and amarradito. And the last fragment I wanted to show is by Shakira, a Colombian singer you already know for sure. And the title of the song is Me Enamoré. In this song, we don't have any diminutivo in the title, but in the lyrics you can find redondita, diminutive of redonda, round. Barbita, diminutive of barba, beard. Ojitos, diminutive of ojos, eyes. And ratito, diminutive of rato, wild. We can also see solito, which is a diminutivo of the word solo. In this case, it could mean alone. So as you can see, at least in the Latin American songs, the songs are full of diminutivos. Okay, let's begin with the definition of diminutivo according to la RAE. RAE is Real Academia Española, and in their dictionary we can see three meanings. Let's have a look at the third one. It says diminutivo is a word formed by diminutive suffixes. So let's jump into two. What is a diminutive suffix? In this case, we can see that it's a suffix which conveys the meaning of reduction of size. For For example, if we describe a small stone, piedra, we can say piedrecilla, and it just means that it's a small thing, small stone. Another meaning is the intention which conveys emotions. For example, que nochecita más atroz. Well, I've had a rough night, I couldn't sleep, and with this diminutive we can show, for example, our anger or irritation. Another one, in this case, is una limosnita, which is a limosna, and so someone on the street is asking you for spare change and is using the diminutivo in order to maybe gain something from you, or is just being polite and kind. We also use diminutivos with adjectives and adverbs in order to convey the meaning of intensity. For example, ahorita, which can mean muy ahora, which is now, right now, or for example, Mexicans can mean even 5 hours later. Cerquita or muy cerca is just very close, cerca, close. And pequeñín can mean muy pequeño or very small. Okay, let's see what are the possible suffixes in Spanish, diminutive suffixes. Here we have a list of suffixes. They are not, there are still more, but in my research, I focus on the standardized suffixes. So in this case, ito, ita, for example, boquita, lucecita, trencito is the one which is commonly used in the peninsular Spanish and Latin American Spanish. But we also have other forms. For example, ico, ica, for example, fotico, gatico, calorcico. This one is used, for example, in parts of Aragon, Andalucia, for example, the western part, and the province of Albacete. And when it comes to the Latin American Spanish, it's used, for example, in Costa Rica, where even Costa Rican people are called ticos because of the preference of this suffix. Then we have, for example, illo, illa, which is quite frequently used in western part of Andalusia, ete, eta, which are of the Valencian and Catalan origin, for example, amiguete, uco, uca, like in Casuca, Puebluco, quite frequently used in Cantabria, in, ina, for example, pelin, or ino, ina, perrino. These suffixes are quite common in Extremadura and in the western part of Castilla-La Mancha, Castilla-León, or in Asturias, and iño, iña, which you can find, for example, in Galicia, probably because of the influence of Gallego. You might wonder, the use of these suffixes, does it only depend on the region where the person who's speaking is from? Not only. For example, when it comes to morphology, certain regions of the Caribbean tend to use ico and ica in case of fotico and gatico because they don't want to hear the T sound twice. For example, fotito or gatito in the Spanish from Spain is perfectly fine, but in those regions it just sounds strange. When it comes to some regions, people might want to use certain suffix depending on the situations. For example, if you want to say that something is small, you might want to use it or ita. But if you want to use some emotions, for example, show your affection towards the person, you might prefer or opt for ico, ica, or illo, illa when you want to be more sarcastic, for example. So there's more into it, not just the original difference. What is interesting, I think, is the possible combinations of different suffixes. For example, you can say ito with in. For example, in the case of chiquitino or chiquitin, you can use it from ito and end it with ino or in this case, chiquitin, chiquitino. You can also use twice the same or even more times the same suffix. For example, chiquititito or chiquitito, chiquitititito, and etc. What is important to remember is that not always is just ito or ico or illo, but sometimes we have the ce or ece in fijo in the middle. For example, in the case of luz We don't say lucita, lucito, but we say lucecita. In the case of for train, tren, you don't say trenito, we say trencito. And in the case of calor, for example, we say calorcico or calorcito, not calorico. So there's still some rules when it comes to the adding the suffix. Okay, let's talk about the parts of speech in which we can use the diminutivo. So first, the nouns, like we said already in the case of the definition of la RAE, adjectives or adverbs. Examples of nouns with this suffix are, for example, boquilla or boquita, like in the case of Rico Martin's song. When it comes to adjectives, you can say redondita, like in the case of Shakira's song, and adverbs, the famous Despacito, which is the diminutive of the word despacio, slowly. So, but it's not everything. What I find fascinating is that in the Spanish language, you can also use the diminutive suffix, for example, in verbs. Here we have some examples of one of the articles that I analyzed in order to write my thesis. And in this case, the diminutive suffix was added to the past participle. So in this case, ha despertado, has woken up, or ha echado, well, has taken or had a nap. In this case, a mother or a parent was talking to a child and using diminutives. So it's also possible. Other curiosities that I came across while doing my research are examples from some of the Latin American countries. So, for example, in the case of Colombia, in one region, you can also add the diminutive suffix to the collective pronouns. For example, bajamelito, instead of bajamelo, get it down for me, for example, the ito was added to the word lo. In the case of personal pronouns like ella or yo, it's also possible, for example, in Ecuador. And they can say ellita instead of ella or yocito instead of yo. When it comes to demonstrative adjectives like this or that, it's also possible. Like in this case in Bolivia, some people say estito instead of esto, or esito instead of eso. And adverbs that we've already talked about. This is my personal anecdote. I was traveling in Peru, and I was in a small village and surrounded by jungle. And there I was in a van traveling, and it was my stop. I wanted to get off, and I didn't know how to open the door. So I asked the driver, how do you open the door? There's no handle. How am I supposed to get off? And then he said, por fuerita. So the handle was from the outside, and this is how I had to get off, which sounded funny to me if I translate it into Polish or English. How can you put the diminutive to the words outside? And another anecdote, in the same village, I was looking for the way to get to the river, and I met this little boy and asked which way are we supposed to, can I go to the river? How can I get to the river? And then he said that way, ayafito. So in this case, you can also add a diminutive to the words like here or there. Okay, another curiosity, I think, is the mix of the words in Spanish and some of the indigenous languages, like in the case of Quechua in Bolivia. There, in the indigenous language, some of the people speak there, the diminutive suffix is inga or inga, so you can come across words which combine Spanish and the diminutive of that language. For example, instead of ratito or ratico or ratillo, they can say ratingo. Instead of ahora, ahorita, ahorilla, or and other Spanish diminutive suffixes, they add the suffix ingo or inga. Another example is instead of saying hermanita, in this example we have still the T from Spanish, but the ending of another indigenous language, I. Entonces, this way, it's hermanatay would be querida hermana, dear sister. There's an interesting study by Davila Garibi, and in his theory, he talks about why in Mexico there are so many diminutivos. He compares this country with the Spanish spoken in other Latin American countries and Spain, and his theory is the possible influence of the local language Nahuatl. If we compare this situation with other countries, for example, Bolivia, Ecuador, or Peru, where there are also other local indigenous languages spoken besides Spanish. I think this is it can be a valid theory that maybe people there speak more with more diminutivos than in Spain because of their own local language, which is also full of diminutivos. Okay, let's jump into the functions and why. What is the objective of a diminutivo? So, as we already said, the first objective is to talk about something which is small. So, for example, casita can be a small house, una casa pequeña. Perrito, it can be a small dog, un perro pequeño. Botellita, a small bottle. Camisilla, a small shirt. But it's not the only function of a diminutivo. To be honest, it can be even the one which is not that commonly used. There are other functions that work that are more frequent. For example, the emotions or feelings that you want to convey. For example, in the phrase "le dijo 4 palabritas." Of course, it also depends on the intonation, but maybe someone had a discussion with someone, or I don't know, the boss had a discussion with his employee, and he told him off. So the palabritas would be that, okay, I was angry and I told him what I think about his performance. Or se ha dado un buen viajecillo. Someone went on a trip, and viajecillo might not be a small trip. The opposite here might be a big trip. Someone has been traveling for, I don't know, 2 years all around the world. And this is the viajecillo in this case. Yet the diminutivo can also have convey the meaning of sarcasm or irony. It can even mean something negative. Of course, it all depends on the context and intonation as well. And if you're envious, maybe I have a friend who always hangs out with some friends, and I always say, "Oh, está con sus amiguillos," and then it could mean something negative. The next situation, for example, people who are in love tend to use this kind of words. For example, amorcito, cariñito, ratita, all the words related to animals, but with a diminutive, and darling, honey, etc. As the example that I showed on the other slide, parents or people in general who talk to their children, you could ask, ¿te has tomado la sopita? And in this case, I talked to a child using diminutives, so the soup would be the word where I show my feelings towards the child. And another function that I talked about before is how to show the intensification of a word. For example, despacio, which could mean very slowly, despacito, very quickly, ahorita, right now, or cerquita, right here, very close. Another type of diminutivo which you can encounter is diminutivo lexicalizado, which is a diminutivo that is not a diminutivo anymore. Like in the song of Shakira, Bonito, Mojito, I didn't highlight them because they're not diminutivos anymore. Maybe they were in the past. For example, bonito used to be a diminutivo of bueno, but now it doesn't mean good, it just means beautiful, nice. In the case of mojito, the song was about the drink. The mojito is a famous drink from Cuba. The etymology, there are different theories. One is that it's a word mojadito, and the other one is that it's a diminutive of mojo, kind of sauce or juice. But if we talk about the cocktail mojito, we don't think of the mojo pequeño. No? We just call it the name of the drink. The same with camiseta. It's just a t-shirt. It's not a small shirt. It's another piece of clothing. Ventanilla. It's not a small window. It's just a window of a car. Or if we go to a bank or to the airport, we go to a ventanilla to do our check-in. The same with pasillo. It's not a small step. Paso pequeño. It's just a corridor. And bocadillo, which is a type of sandwich in Spanish. Okay, so in my presentation, I've covered the answers to these questions. What is a diminutivo? How do you form it? What different suffixes of diminutivos are? What parts of speech do we use the diminutivos with? And what is their function, or what are their functions? If at any point you feel like this is not enough, this is only the introduction to the concept of diminutivo. And I can always share the studies that I have done or all the articles and books that I have had to read. And in this, at this point, you can do your own research and learn more about this fascinating concept, at least from. Okay, is there any questions? Okay, and there's a question from Bernadetta. Por curiosidad, en Polonia hoy en día, en algunos círculos sociales, utilizar diminutivos no se ve con buen ojo. La gente lo percibe como infantil, de mal gusto. ¿Es algún trend similar en España? I thought about it because even yesterday in the chat room, in the Polish chat room, we had this conversation, and one of the participants of this chat room said that, yeah, exactly, in Polish, it's sometimes so irritating when, for example, some ladies in shops use words like dinerito in Polish, which is pieniążki, or also like, it sounds childish. So I think that in Spanish doesn't sound like that. And even big guys with muscles, they still use these words. So I think that is what I find fascinating because I compare it with my native language. And I think, well, in this situation, I wouldn't use the diminutivo in Polish because it would just sound stupid or childish. Meanwhile, in Spanish, it's perfectly fine. And yes, diminutivos are everywhere, I think, on TV and any songs that you can hear, especially Latin American songs, and books, articles, and series. Let's have a look at another question from Dorota. ¿Cuál es tu diminutivo favorito? What's your favorite diminutive? Hard to choose. Sometimes I think it's ito, but to be honest, it's so commonly used. It's not that original anymore. I think then maybe eco recently or iyo. And there's more diminutives that I haven't talked about, which are less common. For example, vuelo, which can also mean other things, not only a diminutive. It's not only a diminutive suffix, but let's say maybe eco for now. Okay, another question. Do you have some advice on how sounding more native in Spanish by using the diminutivo? Well, good question. Maybe if you were living, let's say, in Zaragoza, for sure you would hear that there people use a lot of ico. So maybe you could stick just to that diminutivo for now, or just ito because it's the one which is frequently used everywhere in Spanish Peninsula and also in the Latin American Spanish. Maybe think of some situations when you would use them. For example, if there anything that is small around you, maybe you could learn pick certain things around you. I don't know, I have a mobile phone in front of me and I would just think, oh, how would I use the mobile in this case? I think that what is good is that you can create as many diminutives as you like because there's an infinite number. Yeah, I think. Okay, another question from Steven. ¿Alguna historia graciosa con el uso equivocado de un diminutivo? Any funny story with the misuse of a diminutivo? I would have to think probably a bit longer. I've had embarrassing situations with by misusing certain words in Spanish in general, maybe not diminutivo as such. I think I only smile whenever I hear someone else using the diminutivo in a conversation with me. So, for example, recently I went to this restaurant here in Madrid, and the waiter, I noticed he used a lot of diminutivos just by serving me food, and he was saying, "I do want a dessert, algún postrecito más." And then someone else came in, and they asked if there's another room of this restaurant. And he said, "Yeah, I want saloncito más. There's another room." And I thought, oh, according to my research, he is from, let's say, Zaragoza, from Aragon. So I'm going to ask him while getting the bill if he's from Zaragoza. and he wasn't, and he was a bit surprised. And I said, okay, I'm doing PhD research, and according to the maps that I'm analyzing, you should be from Zaragoza. He said, no, I'm from Albacete. Just so you know, it's a province in Castilla-La Mancha. Sorry, I was confused, both Castillas. And he said, well, we also use eco a lot. And then I came back home and I did some research. I thought, okay, maybe in this case, eco seems like to be the one that is more used in, well, it's not only used frequently in Zaragoza, but also in Albacete. Okay, I finished so quickly. Any more questions? From Victor, ¿usas más diminutivos solo porque los estudias? Do you use more diminutivos only because you're studying them? I think that was, well, in Polish, I don't use them a lot, I think, or at all. I think that because I like them and I study them, I use them, but no. I think even before studying or researching or doing more analysis of this concept, I was already using it a lot because I saw other people or I heard other people using it a lot. So I guess this was a kind of copying behavior in this case. But I guess that I also try to use different suffixes as well, not only ito. And for example, if I meet someone from, let's say, Galicia, probably in a joke, I'm going to use the iño more with this person. And if I meet someone from, for example, Albacete in this case, I'm going to use more ico, for example. But yeah, this is thanks to the knowledge of and my research. At first, I thought it was only ito, which was used in Spanish. Okay, guys, any more questions? There's a question, en Andalucía también se usa mucho los diminutivos, ¿no? So in Andalusia, a lot of diminutives are used as well. Yes, I think that all Spain in general, and Andalusia, according to my research, half of it is more illo, if I remember well, the other half is more ico, which also doesn't mean that it's just ico and just illo. Maybe illo is, I don't know, 6 out of 10 diminutivos would be illo, and the rest would be ico. I think that diminutivos in general tend to disappear. It's more, you can hear more older people using that, or people from rural areas, especially the original ones, not the ito one, which is the more, let's say, the standard one. So if you maybe go to like a jungle in Peru or to some farm near, I don't know, any city in Spain, and you talk to the people there, you will hear many more diminutivos that you would hear in the center of a city or in a city in general. And also, I think that because of traveling, people travel to other countries, move to different cities, and they study. Many more people study at university nowadays, so their language tends to be more neutral now, and they might opt for the more commonly used ones, which is ito and illo, I think, and they might lose the ico, uco, and the rest. So who knows, maybe in, I don't know, 20 or 50 years from now on, there won't be ico, and maybe ico, still so many people use that, but let's say uco, which I think is mainly used in Cantabria, might not be used to such extent, let's say 20 years from now. Let me see, another question from Dominica. Is there a similar tendency with aumentativos, actually? This, I think, would be another research if I had more time and energy, because aumentativos or augmentatives, in case someone doesn't know what it is. For example, when we want to make something sound bigger, for example, que librazo, and the ending azo, or the ending on, ofertón, for example, this kind of suffixes. And I think this would be a good idea for another research, but yeah, I don't know if they might disappear in the future, or if they have different suffixes depending on the region where you're from. Another question from Ingrid: which Spanish-speaking country uses the most diminutives? it can be my impression. I think you still need to check the studies and maybe some statistic comparison. According to what according to my research, when it comes to Latin American countries, I think Mexico, I think I mentioned Mexico before, this tends to be, let's say, famous for the diminutivos, especially the word ahorita. People laugh at this word because they say this is just like saying, this is just saying, I'll do something in like 5 hours, even though it means right now. Ahorita, it can still mean wait for me and I'll do it whenever I have time and whenever I want to. And Costa Rican people called ticos because they use so much ico. They are famous for using diminutivos as well. But in this case of the Puerto Rican and Colombian songs that you've seen the lyrics, they use a lot as well. And so if I have to compare Latin America with Spain, I would say nowadays it's Latin America, unless you go to some rural area in Spain or to the restaurant, which I mentioned to you in Madrid, and you meet the guy from Albacete who uses ico in any phrase that he uses with you. Question from Víctor. ¿Analizas todas las conversaciones que tienes con nativos hispanohablantes en cuanto al uso de diminutivos? Do you analyze all the conversations you have with native people, native Spanish-speaking people when it comes to the use of diminutivos? Yeah, I think if you have been doing so much research on a certain topic, then you see it everywhere. So yeah, I think that whenever I hear a conversation with someone and I don't know where they're from, and if they drop a diminutivo, I already make theories, like with the guy from Albacete from that restaurant. Maybe he's from there, maybe according to my research, he should be from that part. So yeah, I guess I do that. And whenever I see like a song or hear a movie, then I'm gonna stop and maybe listen one more time to check what diminutivo has been used. Another question. ¿Qué son algunas situaciones en cuales es muy común usar el diminutivo? Como ahorita, poquito, etc. What are the certain situations in which it would be common to use a diminutivo? The ones that you've just mentioned, the adverbios, the adverbs. It could be, for example, that you want to say right now. You want to intensify that it's right now, ahorita. Or just poquito, very little, very, very, like muy poco. But this would be one of the meanings. You can still use sarcasm, irony, or whenever you want to say, I don't know, you talk to a child and you want to use like cute, sweet forms, or if you talk to some person who you love. So yeah, there's many situations or many meanings which would be behind the diminutivo. So I guess it just depends on you, what you're trying to say, what you want to convey. Any more questions? I think that another good research would be comparing maybe the diminutivos in other languages, in Romance languages, for example, with Portuguese, because I think that Portuguese from Brazil, I haven't done any research on the comparison of the diminutivos in Portugal and Brazil, but from my own experience when I went to Brazil, it was very similar. People use diminutivos also in a lot. And yeah, especially like big guys with muscles. And I remember thinking like, oh, Polish guy like this wouldn't use a diminutivo because it just sounds too maybe as if he was like a girl or a child. And so maybe it could be a good idea for another research in case anyone would like to do something, comparing it with other languages, for example, Italian or Catalan or Gallego. Yeah, I can answer any question. Any other question if you guys want to know more about the diminutivos. Meanwhile, if you'd like to know about my PhD research, because I only mentioned a little bit about it, what I do is I look at the diminutivos from the more geographical distribution point of view. I analyze maps of books called Atlas Lingüísticos, and these are books which contain maps which were made because there were some scientists who went to rural parts of Spain and Latin America, and they conducted interviews with local farmers. And based on those interviews, they make maps. So if you are, for example, interested in what word they would use for a little dog or a certain plant or certain tool that they use in agriculture, you would look at the map with this word. Or if you're interested in the syntax or morphology, like in the case of diminutivos, you would look at the specific map. And so what I do is I look at the maps which contain diminutivos. So in some cases, there is already a question for this. Sorry. For the person who's being interviewed, what is the diminutivo of perro? What is the diminutivo of gato? And then I look at the map and then I make a statistic study of, oh, this person has replied 10 times gatito, and this person has replied twice gatuco in Cantabria, for example. And if in case there's no maps like that, what is the diminutivo of, and then the word, I use maps with vocabulary. For example, what is the word you would use to talk to your grandpa? And some people would say just abuelo, normal word, and others would say abuelín or abuelito. Or what is the word for the young of maybe a cow? For example, would it be vaquita? Or maybe a young of a perro would be cachorro. Some would say cachorro, cachorrito, or maybe perrito. And then I compare the data with the maps. The only thing is that the maps were made quite a long time ago. The interviews were conducted a long time ago. It was, I think, in the 50s. And the Atlas Lingüísticos were published in the 70s. So I'm aware that the language might have changed since then, especially that people now go to universities and there's internet, TV, even in poor areas. And the language changes. So I guess it will be another idea for another research to conduct some interviews with people nowadays, for example. Okay, there's no other question. Thanks for your attention. I hope you enjoyed my my presentation. If at any point you'd like to know more and would like to you would like me to provide you with the titles or of the articles or of the books that I used in my research, feel free to reach out to me and I'll gladly contact you. Okay, bye-bye.